rabbi turned therapist? Hear the story of Dr. Joel Zeff in our very first episode of Talking Team CBT. Welcome to Talking Team CBT, where you'll hear stories from therapists and clinicians around the world on their journey and experience with Team CBT. Welcome everyone to Talking Team CBT with Daniel and Angela. And today our guest is Dr. Joel Zeff. Am I saying that correctly?
Joel is just fine. If
Joel
Dr.
is
Burns
just
is
fine.
David, then I'm Joel.
Okay, Joel, that's great. Well, we're super excited to have you today, and want to talk a little bit about how team has affected you both professionally and privately, like your personal experience. Could you tell us when and how you got involved in team?
Yeah, so I'll try. It's a long story, of course, but I'll try to make it slightly shorter. That is the following. So it's sort of a second career for me. I'm a rabbi and Jewish educator, born in the United States. You could probably tell because of my accent. But 28 years ago, we moved to Israel. Before moving to Israel, I was a congregational rabbi in Los Angeles. And then when we moved to Israel, believe it or not, it's like bringing coal to Newcastle or ice to Eskimos or something. They don't need more rabbis here in terms of congregational rabbis. So I was involved in Jewish education for many years. And then at a certain point, I ended up being the rabbi of a congregation in Sacramento, California, but while living in Israel. Now, that may sound a little bit strange. It was on a commuter basis. It was a very sort of unusual arrangement. I flew back and forth between Israel, where my family stayed, and then I was this rabbi of the congregation in Sacramento. And I saw that commuting back and forth between Israel and Sacramento was not something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. It just was a lot of wear and tear and being away from the family. We have a nice big family, thank God, of 9 kids and 13 grandchildren, and with a lot of blessings. And to be away from all that was painful. So I was thinking, well, if I want to go back to Israel on a full-time basis, I think I have to retool a bit from being a rabbi and Jewish educator. So what's something that I'm profoundly interested in that perhaps could be sort of a segue into a slightly different career? And that was dealing with people's internal lives. Believe it or not, and you will certainly believe it, when the rabbi is giving a sermon or a minister, or priest, etc., a lot of people are really thinking about the things that are weighing on them in life, their challenges within the family, financial challenges, health challenges, etc. They're not really necessarily interested in some kind of sermon analyzing a particular passage in the Bible. And I wanted to address the people where they're really at, and that is these sort of existential, emotional issues. Now, rabbis, at least I'm an Orthodox rabbi. Orthodox rabbis receive very little training in pastoral counseling. And I found it very quickly that rabbis are sort of first, and other clergy are first responders when it comes to mental health issues. People often go to a clergy when they have these type of crises. So just very quickly tell an anecdote just to demonstrate this. But as a first rabbi in Los Angeles, so I knew almost nothing about the practical aspect of being a rabbi, and certainly almost nothing about the pastoral aspects. So about a couple weeks into this new position, someone came to me and said, I have to speak to you about something personal and very urgent. And then he said to me the following: I found and he used the Yiddish word bashert, which sort of means like intended one, the woman that was meant for him. And then he says, but it's not my wife. He's a married man who's now found his intended one, but it's not his wife. It's somebody else. What do I do, Rabbi? Well, let me look that up in the law codes here. There's no answer to a question like that. How do you deal with that? So I just said, go to a therapist. So that was an example of how clergy are often first responders, and at the same time, how inadequate I felt playing that role. So when I was thinking about, okay, I want to really, in a very serious way, approach this of retraining to deal with those internal issues. And I ended up going to this is a little bit strange for an Orthodox rabbi, to a Presbyterian theological seminary. in the San Francisco Bay Area. This was during the period when I was commuting between Israel and Sacramento. So the San Francisco Theological Seminary, and I did a doctorate in pastoral counseling at this Presbyterian Theological Seminary. I like to tell people that I am either the first rabbi associated with that institution, or maybe the second. If Jesus was a rabbi, so that I'm the second rabbi that was associated with assuming Jesus was Presbyterian. I don't know, maybe Seventh-day Adventist, I don't know. But in any case, so I did that doctoral program there, which gave me a very good overview of the whole issue of counseling, but I didn't feel I had any real methodology. So my advisor there told me, CBT is for you. You think that way. So I said, okay, great. What's CBT? It wasn't quite that bad, but I knew that Aaron Beck, the Beck Institute, I called them up in Philadelphia, and they said, we don't do anything in California in terms of training, but there's something called the Feeling Good Institute in the Stanford area. Call them up. I called them up, and they said, oh, there is a wonderful teacher, Dr. Lee Harrington, who was living in Davis, who's right near Sacramento. And I did my initial training one-on-one with Lee Harrington, which was just heaven on earth. What a gift. And then through that, I attended the summer intensive in the San Francisco Bay Area with Dr. Burns. That was in 2017. And I went out, got to go on a hike with him, all these really neat things that are part of the lore of CBT, TeamCBT, and kept on growing, went back to Israel, more training with Ron Dabrowski, one-on-one, who is also just amazing. And then I also attended different groups, including for a while, I don't know if you remember, Angela, I was in your practice group, and also with Daniel Minton. Daniel, you were also involved in that group at that time. And now I'm involved as a small group leader as Level 3 certified on the Wednesday International group that is led by Richard, Rhonda, and Lee actually shows up also occasionally on that one. So I'll just very quickly tell you what's so transformative about the team, and that is it's a method. It's a very I like to call it in a way which sounds disparaging, but I don't mean it that way. It's almost like therapy by the numbers. It's very systematic, and it's also not highfalutin. Dr. Burns has this very sort of egalitarian, bring it down to 5th grade level, he likes to say, I think something like that. So it's comprehensible, it makes sense, it's compelling, and it's methodical. So for someone who didn't come from a therapy background like me, to have a system that could take me from T to M and results, what could be better than that? So that's so now I do 2 things professionally. So I have a private practice here in Israel, which is mostly dealing with Orthodox Jewish clients, and I also teach privately Jewish studies, and that's sort of my old but present career and love. So that's sort of the short version of how I got involved in TEAM.
Okay, thanks so much for sharing. I love how, like so many of us, we start our journey in counseling, and at some point we encounter TEAM, and it's so transformative, and really it changes us, personally and professionally. So maybe if it's okay to tell us, a little bit more, like how, TEAM has, kind of been impacted as you have your private practice now and the clients that you work with, and then maybe also a little bit how TEAM has affected you personally.
Yeah. So in terms of practical work with clients, that was a very terrifying prospect before TEAM. I just had no idea where to start. That the different methodologies I've been exposed to were nowhere near as systematic as TEAM. And I don't think I was profoundly more trained when I finished my doctoral program than I was that 2 weeks after becoming a rabbi and someone telling me they found their intended one, but it's not their wife. Only through TEAM did I feel that I could, in good conscience, offer a path towards healing to those who came to me for healing. And indeed, of course, every client is a challenge, and things don't work out always in a linear fashion. There's always surprises. I cannot say that I take people towards wholeness in 2 hours like Dr. Burns can do. Definitely not. But I feel like I can, with integrity, offer something to the client. Now, also, of course, in my own personal life and in relations with other people, anywhere from the 5 secrets, I've gotten myself out of tremendous potential problem by being able to respond after taking a deep breath by using the 5 secrets of effective communication. And it's amazing how that's been able to diffuse situations which I would have in the past simply put my foot in my mouth and dug my grave even deeper by responding in a defensive fashion or an aggressive fashion. And then also, of course, just the cognitive model. After a while, you sort of, it hovers over your head. Okay, what am I feeling? What are my thoughts? Do they make sense? Can I reframe them? Right, etc. So at a certain point, it becomes kind of integrated into the therapist, how we go about acting in this world using that model, and not necessarily in a conscious manner. It becomes sort of part of the circuitry of how we approach and experience life.
I love what you're saying. It's so transformative, and it is like, someone asked me, like, well, they actually on the listserv, they asked, do you ever use team with friends and family? And I said, well, I can't not use team. It's part of who I am. I don't necessarily do therapy with everyone, but I certainly am team. Like, team has permeated everything that I do. And I love what you said, like that it's kind of combined your 2 careers, because you're using these tools in both areas, in both venues, to make it more effective being a rabbi and being an instructor. And I think that's amazing and awesome. I know many of our listeners will have multiple careers. They might not even be ready to launch yet, that we'll have students. And I think that's an encouragement to all of us. And I'm certainly late in life starting my career too. And I was a housewife and mom. That was my first career. So what is one thing in particular, if you can nail down, I know you mentioned 5 secrets and maybe that's it. What's one thing that has improved your practice in terms of team? So I know we learn lots of tools, but is there one that's standing out for you, or even right now, what's kind of like on your agenda right now to improve?
Wow. So there's just so many aspects of the team model which are so transformative. It's really hard to, not fair to the team model to choose a few. Certainly in terms of the 5 secrets, there's no doubt about it. That's actually totally transformative. The fact that it's linear, that there's a system, which I've already mentioned, I found to be absolutely transformative. But to give another example, perhaps, of the kind of the way you can grab onto something specific in team, the fact that the distorted cognitions are classified 10 categories, right? So instead of kind of thinking in some kind of just vague way, is what they're thinking accurate or true, to reflect reality? You don't have to do guesswork. That this system presents these 10 cognitive distortions with names that are lay language, right, that a 5th grader can understand, and with definitions that are straightforward without using fancy technical jargon to make it sound like science, right? I think that's Dr. Burns's amazing contribution, who's so brilliant, but insists on a kind of very down-to-earth, humble presentation. And I've seen him in some of the podcasts, like respond when there's too much jargon and say, you just say that so that a 5th grader can understand it, because that's my level, right? Will say about himself. And so I would say, as another example, to systematize the 10 cognitive distortions in a way which is so clear. Of course, another thing, I could keep going for a long time, and this is not to make you feel good, Angela. Those tools that you created, I'm going to say they're redemptive. The electronic tools that you created has totally transformed my practice, because now it's easy. right? Once I get a sense of where the client is at, go into the computer, click on that particular electronic form, which Angela created, print it, and we get to work. That's an incredible boost in efficiency and specificity, and it's focusing our efforts. That's just amazing. So Dr. Burns obviously is the the pioneer there, but what you contributed is on a practical level, just I think redemptive is not a overly a lofty term.
No, I'm right there with you on that. I think we all feel that same way. The team has been so, like you said, systematic for us, and gets away from that jargon, is so much more approachable. And yeah, totally what Angela has helped in that regard with the tools, and increasing with that system has, I think, made it so much more accessible for everyone. I was going to ask you, Joel, if you could tell us a little bit. I'm intrigued. Team has certainly gone across the world. There was a conference this month in Poland, but one of the countries where team has really taken a hold of is in Israel. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the team community in Israel, and your sense of how that's become such a hotspot for team in the world.
Yeah, so that is interesting. I mean, I think partly has to do with Maor Katz. So Dr. Maor Katz is the founder and director of the Feeling Good Institute. And because he is from Israel originally, so a lot of Israelis have gravitated towards Team because of his presence there and his colleagues in Israel. So now there's actually a Feeling Good Institute here in Israel, which is still, I would say, in diapers. It was founded recently, and it's growing. And I think there's also something about CBT. There's something very Jewish about CBT, that the notion that the emotions are a function of thought, and therefore we have to really get into the thought, right? The cognition. That's a very, very fundamental Jewish idea, which is so rooted in the notion of study, of thinking, right? And there's a very natural fit for Jews who are exposed to Jewish tradition and that emphasis on the cognitive process to be able to introduce that model and to use that model. And I actually do something a little different than most team therapists, and that is I'll actually use tools from Jewish tradition within the team model, which, because of the population I deal with, which are mostly Orthodox Jews, it can be particularly effective and speak to them in a very deep way when I'm using so they don't sort of bifurcate their lives into, here's my psychological problems and there's Judaism over there. That they can find within a framework that feels authentically Jewish a path towards healing in terms of their emotional and psychological well-being.
I think that's really key to what team offers and what we're trying to do, as team therapists and life coaches, is integrating that into a person's entire life and way of being. And certainly for those who take spirituality very seriously, it's not just, a thing on the side. It does permeate us. And so to have an approach that allows us to have that freedom to explore that as a package is extremely important. And so I just love what you're saying about that, and how you're incorporating Judaism and team when you're working with clients, so you can honor and respect where they're coming from. One other question I'd like to give you, and I'll give the last question to Daniel. He can pick whatever he would like after this one. But I wonder if there's any aspects of team you found particularly challenging.
Okay, so that's of course, a great question. And this will sound a little bit kind of paradoxical. I think its strength is its challenge. Now that I said that, I'll explain what I mean. Because it's so incredibly systematic that it's tempting to feel that it must have, that the therapy session, the live therapy session, it has to follow in a very linear way the team model, that you do T and then E and then A and then M. When you look at really good team therapists like you, Angela, and just Jill and David and Rhonda and all these superstars out there, you'll see it's amazing because it's true. In a large sense, they're following the team model. They're always within the team model, but there's a flexibility within the team model that they'll go back to back to empathy, right? They may be in method, except for they see that the situation right now means that we have to do a little detour and maybe even go back to a previous step. So I like to compare it to a good musician. So imagine sort of a classically trained musician who for years practiced the scales and all the technique. And then they decide to become a jazz musician using all of the very rigid training that they received. But now, because there's a certain mastery of it, it flows from the heart as they improvise. So I think that that's sort of the challenge, is to make sure that the team model is there to serve the client, not to force the client to fit into a linear model. And I definitely have experience where you can almost see where the client feels, wait a second, right? Like, why do I have to fill out this thing, right? No, right? And I understand it, right? Because it's comforting for me to use a kind of linear model, but it's not authentic enough to the client's needs. And so therefore, the great challenge to reach that level of expertise so that we can use the team model as a great jazz musician. All the elements in the way it serves the client, not to force the client to fit the model.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to us. I think we like to think of, like you're saying, that team is this framework for therapy, but not a formula. And I think when we follow it that way, like you said, the way the masters do this, we find it really getting to the successes that it can. This has been such a fascinating interview with you, and getting to hear your perspective on team. I guess if we have time for one more question, maybe Joel, you could tell us, if I don't know, if we had a chance to really get one message out to all the therapists in the world about team, what would you want to say to them?
Yeah, wow. So I would say the following, that there are so many different modalities of therapy out there, and people, for all kinds of reasons, are trained in one or many of the different modalities. But team, as you said, Daniel, just now, creates an overall framework and systemization in which anything can fit into that model. Because methods basically means anything that really works to be able to change that distorted cognition to a constructive and positive cognition. And whether that's through a somatic approach, sometimes it could be a very bottom-up kind of approach, dealing with trauma. It can be ACT. It can be, all these different, I can't, ridiculous to name them all. It could be hypnosis. All of these things are tools which can fit into the team model. So I think it behooves therapists to familiarize themselves with this model, because it'll create a very effective framework, which will just boost their own modalities that they're most familiar with. And if I could just add one point to that another reason why the team is just so amazing. The team community is unbelievable. It's a little scary. I'm not so used to so much love. It's so supportive. It's so welcoming. People give away things for free. It's just beyond belief. And it's not just my experience, it's many other people's experience too, that they're sort of in shock. They're sort of, where's the catch? This can't be real. It is real. And I don't know where that came from. Probably from Dr. Burns, who is incredibly loving, and the latest podcast of him sobbing in empathy. I don't know if you heard this latest one. It's just unbelievable. And that genuine emotional commitment, support, and love is, what a gift. What could be better than that?
Well, I 100% agree with you. I think this whole idea of practice what we preach is really integral part of team philosophy. And, we know that truth just frees us. And I think that enables us to have that connection with each other, to get rid of the ego and all the things that kind of get in the way of community. Well, Joel, thank you so much for being here. Super excited that you were part of our Talking with Team, and hope you'll join us for another episode.
I'd love to. And thank both of you for everything you do and this particular great experience.
Yep. Thanks for
Take
joining.
care.